Welcome to another episode of Workbench Creations. Today I'm going to take you through a particular process in model building, scratch building, that is pretty common and used quite often with pretty much all genres of model building. And the topic we're going to be discussing is opening and accessing doors, vents, ports, anything that needs a hole going through it. Often in model building, we're stuck with already molded and closed doorways, hatches, screens, and ventilation systems. But that should be no obstacle to a model builder who's a little bit savvy and adventurous. And so most of us, what we do is we just cut right through that hole using tools available on our workbench. And today I have my Huey from Hobby Boss. It's the UH1C, and as you can see, there is the molded on closed doorway, followed by a molded screen ventilation system. Again, no obstacles that we can't handle. This is quite doable. And so I'm going to take you through the several steps of cutting through these doorways. Because maybe you're not going to be building this particular helicopter, but you may be building a car, a tank, a ship that's going to have some vents, and you would like to cut it through to bring out more detail in your model building. And here we go. Let's just flip it over. As you can see, it's already been started. I've cut out my door, and I've cut through two ventilation systems. What tools were used to do this? I just used a Dremel, drill bits. You got all sizes. You can, from the smallest to the largest. I always recommend probably going on the smaller side, and make sure your drill bits are sharp or brand new. If for some reason you're drilling and you're melting plastic, that's a good indication that your drill bits are dull and need to be replaced. The question for all scratch building model builders is where to begin, where to make that first cut. And though it may appear pretty simple, there are some cautions when cutting through any plastic doorway or vent. One of your first primary concerns is your exterior, that being the part of the model that's outside that is going to be observed by all viewers. You don't want to damage any finished detail on the outside. And so when making that first initial cut, you want to take a few things into consideration. You don't want to damage any of the edge work at all. As you can see, really up close, I still have a remainder of the door right on the top edge and along down the side. And that's going to have to get sanded and filed smooth later. But I just wanted to show this for emphasis, is that you want to make sure that your edge work is as accurately described or seen as possible, and everything is nice and smooth. And to make sure that that is nice and smooth, when you're drilling, you always want to give yourself 1 or 2 millimeters of space between the actual edge and where you're making that cut. Because remember, the drill bit is only cutting the majority or the meat of the plastic out. It's not doing any finishing detail. Your cutting knife and your files will do all the edge work. So always leave yourself 1 to 2 or even 3 millimeters of space between the cut and your finished edge work. Let's go in and see where I started my work. I began by marking out with a Sharpie pen. If you notice really close, there's several black dots. So one here, here, up here, and there. Those are my starting locations, and that's where I'm going to put in my first drill bits. With my start points marked from the inside using a Sharpie pen, I then went with my drill bit and popped each start point out with my Dremel tool. Now I have all 4 corners of the door marked. Now it's just a matter of systematically drilling a series of circles using my drill bit all the way around, forming a square. And in a sense, I'm basically punching out the doorway. And all that will remain at the end is a series of jagged little circular edges that just are about 1 to 2 or maybe 3 millimeters from the actual finished edge. Now let's go and get that done. Here it is. It's all been drilled through. It looks like somebody took a machine gun to it. So as you can see, I have a systematic series of holes going along my edge. And I followed that edge using my starting pilot holes that I started using the reverse. Now you may be looking at this going, well, Ross, you have a thick edge right here down in the bottom. It seems to be a lot larger than 2 to 3 millimeters. And you're right. But we got to remember that this entire door is going to be completely removed. And my actual measurements that I'm using is based on the molded edge work of the inside of the model kit. Because if you remember from the beginning, I used my Sharpie pen and I marked just inside the molded lip edge. And that's what I'm going to be cutting out. Now in the reverse, that extra door will be removed later on. To get the door completely removed, I'm just going to take my drill bit and I'm going to systematically slice through all the circles, one circle after another. In fact, it's pretty quick because there's very thin plastic between each circle. So it's going to be proverbially like a hot knife through butter. The hole has been made, and don't worry, I know it does not look very beautiful at the moment, but I can assure you when we're finished, it's going to look very nice and handsome. So as you can see, you just have a series of jagged little edges where the circles were. And yes, the door, the outer part of the door is still in existence, but that will be removed later in the future. On the reverse, we have our door, and the entire internal frame, the molded frame edge, which I wanted to keep and was the actual desired location of the cut line, has been preserved. And now all we need to do is do a little trim work using our cutting knife and files. The doorway has been trimmed and made smooth using my cutting knife and my filing. I mostly used a square needle file for the final touches. And I worked it all the way to the molded inside edge, so everything is nice and flush. Now I am really concerned about the remaining parts of the door that was on the molded exterior. To do that, I'm going to use my Dremel tool and other sanding abrasives to reduce these remaining pieces of plastic so they'll be flush and smooth with the hull structure of the helicopter. To prevent any collateral damage, I've taken masking tape and I've taped the outer edges. That will just give me a nice insurance policy to prevent scratching and other damage to the plastic that I do not want removed or scratched. After grinding down the remaining pieces of the doorway, it's nice and flush and smooth with the outer hull surface. And as I started peeling away the tape, I had a very, very thin strip of the remaining door. So all I did is take my needle file and just sort of file down that little lip of the doorway till it's completely flush with the hull. And now there's very little visibility of that remaining door, so the last pieces will probably just be sanded with some fine grit sandpaper. As I continue peeling down the rest of the tape, I'll just continue the process of filing and sanding until it's completely smooth. You may notice that down in the corner here I do have this little arch, and that's a little bit of a challenge which we will continue to work on as the tutorial progresses. But I will just say that it has to do with the insert for the main floor decking of the helicopter. You may see that it has these little little tabs right here, and these tabs connect inside the slots, which are located right here, if you can see them. Yeah, there's one here and one here. And obviously what you're seeing on the outside is the edging of that box. And what I'm going to have to do is just mark it with some marking, like a Sharpie pen, and trim it down so that I have a complete square on the outside of the door frame. When removing doors and other ventilation units, or basically just making holes in your model kits, usually there's going to be a little bit of scratch building or a little bit of cutaway of styrene in the process. As you can see in this particular picture, I have these two squares that we mentioned earlier, and they need to be removed as I'm going to be doing a full interior of the helicopter. To do that, I just inserted my floor plate and I took a black Sharpie pen and I just kind of highlighted the areas that needed to be cut down. So the next process is just trimming the visible pieces that are in the way. To do that, all you really need is, I'm going to use a little bit of a little cutting saw, and I'm just going to make a 90-degree notch on this one. And then for the second square right here, I'm just going to grind it down using my Dremel tool. Don't be afraid to do the cutting. In this case, I'm just going to grind it down, not completely flush, but just enough so that my floor plate will go right on top of it. Because in this case, I'm going to be using some brass photo etch that's just going to cover the ground down area. So it doesn't need to be perfect or nicely. There's no finish work that will be needed. In this case, this one will need finish work as it is part of the edge of the door. So once you've cut your 90-degree angle, just as we did with the other part of the door, just file and sand it and trim it down with your cutting knife and it'll be just fine. And here's the finished results on the reverse fuselage. I started my 90-degree angle with my saw, and then with a cutting knife and files, I just smoothed out the rest of the doorway. In this square, I just ground it down with my Dremel. As you can see, there's still some bumps and scratches in there, but that's all going to be covered and hidden with the floor plating. Let's just take a look on the reverse. It's a pretty clean cut. And what we can do, just to see if we can add this in, hopefully we can see it. If not, that's okay. And it's not too bad. You can see where the square still is visible and where the floor plate inserts inside. And you can see there's a little hairline of a gap, and that's okay, because that can be filled with putty, or in this case I'm going to have a floor plate that's going to cover right over it, and it's going to come right to the outer lip of the door. So nothing is going to be seen, nothing will remain of the plastic insides. With all my main cuts complete, this is going to conclude part 1 of episode 2 of Workbench Creations. Join me for my next episode where I go in and drop in the actual floor plating and the screens on my helicopter. I really thank you for taking this time to watch this episode, and hopefully you'll stick around and want to watch the next one coming up sometime in the summer. It's been a real pleasure to try to demonstrate some of these techniques in the model building hobby, and I really hope that this encourages you to try it out with your model, wherever that may be. Maybe it's going to be a car, a ship, a spaceship, a tank, who knows, but sometime you may find cutting out a door or a vent hole brings a little bit more detail and shine to your model kit. So thank you, have a good day, and I'll see you again here on YouTube. Model on!